to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're digging into a set of sources you sent us, covering, well, a whole lot of ground across East and Southeast Asia.
Yeah, quite the mix. Japan, Korea, China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam. It's a busy region.
It really is. And our job today is to try and unpack all of that, find the key threads, and really understand what's going on, especially zeroing in on something you flagged. The challenges Vietnam's facing with the Mekong River,
Yeah.
both strategic and environmental.
Right, a critical issue. So let's get into it.
Okay, but before we really dive deep into the Mekong specifics, maybe we should just quickly touch on some other big headlines popping up in these sources, just to get the broader regional picture.
Good idea. It helps set the scene. Because everything's connected, really. Security, economy, infrastructure, it all ripples outwards.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So take Taiwan. Your sources, Taipei Times, BBC News, they're really hammering home the ongoing security concerns.
Yeah, it's not subtle. One piece talks about China's military drills near the island, not just as exercises, but sophisticated rehearsals for a forced unification.
No.
Simulating blockades, hitting critical infrastructure.
Pretty intense language.
It is. And it makes the talk around Taiwan's own defense spending really significant. The sources mention Taiwan boosting its budget.
And there was that perspective from former U.S. officials mentioned.
Right, basically saying that if Taiwan shows it's truly willing and able to defend itself, U.S. support becomes more likely if things escalate. It's about signaling commitment.
Okay. Then moving north, South Korea. Your sources mentioned some domestic stuff there.
Uh-huh. The Korea Herald had pieces on economic pledges, President Lee Jae-myung talking about dividends, transparency, even getting rid of the so-called Korea discount.
The lower valuations for their stocks.
Exactly, and aiming for, 5,000 points on the Kospi index. Pretty ambitious target.
And on the security side, regarding North Korea,
Well, there was that mention of South Korea stopping the propaganda loudspeaker broadcasts towards the north. A shift in approach, maybe, coming shortly after the current administration took office. A different tactic for managing tensions, perhaps.
interesting. Okay, let's head south a bit. Singapore and Malaysia. Some business news there.
Yeah, the closure of Jetstar Asia, that's a low-cost airline based in Singapore, and its shutdown definitely impacts travel between Singapore and Malaysia, and probably wider regional routes, too.
The Straits Times piece quoted analysts saying the writing was on the wall.
Pretty much. Loss-making, tough market. They suggested it shrinks consumer options, but probably won't, seriously damage Singapore-Changi status as a major hub long-term.
Makes sense. And then broader economics U.S.-China trade. Several sources mention that.
Right. Seems like officials reached some kind of deal, easing export curbs, trying to keep that trade truce alive, as one source put it.
There was even a quote, I think, from President Trump saying a deal was done.
Yeah, after meetings in London, apparently. It just shows that ongoing, sometimes shaky, back and forth between the two big economies.
And quickly, elsewhere in Southeast Asia, Cambodia and the Philippines.
Your sources mention Cambodia looking for more Chinese help, maybe even beyond that big canal project we'll get to. And for the Philippines, BBC News had reports on the continued worries about China's presence near islands Manila claims in the South China Sea.
Right. That vivid description near Pagasa Island, islanders facing China's menacing presence.
Yeah, paints a picture. So all these headlines, even just briefly touching on them, show a region juggling a lot. Security fears, economic goals, big infrastructure plans.
And it really sets the stage for the main topic you wanted us to focus on, Vietnam and the Mekong River challenges.
Exactly. This is where we see those regional currents having a really direct impact.
Okay, let's shift gears then, the main deep dive. Vietnam's strategic and environmental pressures tied to the Mekong.
And what comes through loud and clear from the sources is how activities way upstream are messing with the river's flow and health downstream, particularly where it hits Vietnam. And the big player here is dam construction.
Yeah, the scale is pretty staggering. One source specifically mentions China operating, get this, 12 mainstream dams on the Mekong itself.
And that's not all. Plus, another 95 dams on its tributaries. That's a huge amount of infrastructure controlling the river's headwaters.
So what are the environmental impacts for Vietnam, especially that vital Mekong Delta region?
They're massive and directly linked to those dams. Your sources explain how they've drastically cut down the amount of water flowing into the delta.
Just the volume of water.
Right, the volume, but also, and this is critical, the amount of sediment the river naturally carries. That's been significantly reduced too.
Okay, explain that. Why is less water and less sediment such a huge problem for Vietnam?
Well, the Mekong Delta isn't just some region, it's Vietnam's absolute agricultural powerhouse. It's breadbasket, basically. Your sources really underscore its importance. It supports something like 80 million people's livelihoods. It's an enormous number of people. And economically, it generates one-third of Vietnam's entire GDP.
A third. Wow.
Yeah. So less water means salt water from the sea pushes further inland, especially in the dry season, killing crops. And less sediment. That's the stuff that naturally builds up the delta land, keeps it fertile, stops it sinking. Without it, you get erosion, land subsidence, poorer soil. It's devastating for rice, for fish farming, everything. It's a genuine threat to the whole region's viability.
Okay, so that's the pressure from upstream dams, changing the river's fundamentals.
Yeah.
But the sources you sent highlight another major project, this time downstream in Cambodia,
Yeah.
the Funan Techo Canal. What do we know about that?
The sources describe it as a really ambitious plan, a 180-kilometer canal that's about 112 miles.
And where would it run?
The plan is to cut it from the Mekong system near Phnom Penh, slicing southwest across Cambodia right to the Gulf of Thailand coast.
And the main goal?
To give Cambodia its own direct sea access, essentially, letting ships bypass Vietnamese ports down in the Mekong Delta.
Okay, so what are the potential impacts of this project, based on the sources,
Sure.
particularly for Vietnam?
Well, sources flag a kind of double whammy here. Environmentally, like the dams, it means diverting more water out of the Mekong system,
From where exactly?
specifically from the Bassac River, which is a major branch of the Mekong just before it flows into Vietnam. That's water the already stressed Mekong Delta desperately needs to, fight salinity, irrigate fields, keep the ecosystem functioning.
But another hit to the water supply.
Exactly. And then there's the strategic economic side. The whole point is to reduce Cambodia's reliance on Vietnamese ports like Ho Chi Minh City or Kai Mep. It creates competition, potentially shifting trade patterns, and lessening the strategic importance of Vietnam's delta access points.
Which makes perfect sense why, as your sources point out, Vietnam has expressed serious misgivings about this canal. It hits them on multiple fronts: environment, economy, strategy.
Absolutely. And it's not just China upstream causing issues. Your sources also mention Laos.
Ah, right. The battery of Southeast Asia ambition.
Precisely. They're heavily into hydropower. The sources say Laos already runs 77 dams with plans for 61 more, and crucially, that includes 7 planned right on the Mekong mainstream.
So more disruption to the river's natural flow and sediment.
Yes. While Laos aims to generate power for export, those dams add another layer modifying the river's behavior before it even gets near Vietnam or Cambodia's canal intake.
So Vietnam's really feeling squeezed. You've got China and Laos altering the flow and sediment from way upstream, and then Cambodia planning to divert water further down with this massive canal.
And linking this back to the wider picture, like China's big economic footprint and infrastructure push in the region, the sources note this could complicate Vietnam's relationships.
How so?
Well, Vietnam finds itself in a really tricky diplomatic spot. They need to maintain decent ties with China, their powerful neighbor, and also with partners like Cambodia and Laos. But at the same time, they absolutely have to defend their vital national interests in the Mekong Delta. It's a delicate balancing act, trying to protect the Delta while keeping regional relationships stable and maintaining some influence.
It really does sound like being caught in a hydraulic vice, as you said. Pressured from upstream, pressured from downstream, all tangled up with regional politics and economics. So just to pull it together from those sources you shared, Vietnam's essential Mekong Delta is under immense threat.
Immense threat, yes.
Driven first by all those dams upstream in China, and Laos cutting off water and vital sediment, which hits agriculture and causes land loss.
Yeah.
And then compounded by Cambodia's proposed Funan Techo Canal, which would take more needed water and also aims to shift shipping away from Vietnamese ports.
That sums it up pretty well. It really shows how these big infrastructure projects, often driven by national interests far away, can have profound cascading consequences downstream.
It's a stark reminder of how interconnected water resources, the environment, economies, and geopolitics are, especially in a shared river basin like the Mekong.
Absolutely. Decisions in one part of the basin send ripples, sometimes tidal waves, through the rest. Understanding these dynamics is just crucial for grasping the future of Southeast Asia.
Really insightful, pulling all that together from the material you provided. A bit sobering, perhaps, but crucial to understand. We scanned the region and then really focused in on those Mekong challenges for Vietnam.
It certainly paints a complex picture of the pressures and balancing acts involved.
Well, thank you for sending these sources our way and letting us dive into them with you. That's all the time we have for today.